Chapter 14. Nico. I sighed and looked at Luna, ready to trek through the wilderness looking for some mythical place. The girl had balls, that was for sure. Probably more than me. But if I wanted her, I was going to have to follow her lead. Fine. I'll go with you. I don't think we're going to find anything, though. There's absolutely nothing out here. Luna grabbed her duffel out of the back of the truck and hoisted it over her shoulder, then squeezed past the roadblock onto the overgrown path. I grabbed mine too and hurried after her. Luna had no clue which way to go, and the place wasn't visible, so for lack of a better idea we followed the old path. For a while, thrashing through knee-high overgrowth. It was better than the waist-high grass on either side of us. Eventually, the trail grew narrower, more rocky, and started to incline as it led towards the mountains ahead. We trudged on until Luna tripped on a rocky outcropping and stumbled, landing with a loud thud and an oomph. Are you okay? I quickly kneeled down to check on her. Yeah, I'm fine. I held out a hand to help her as she scrambled to her feet, but she ignored it, brushing off her dusty pants instead, then wiping the sweat off her forehead, smearing it with dirt. When she tossed her duffel back over her shoulder and started to climb again, I grabbed her arm. Luna, stop. This is nuts. Look around, there's nothing out here. She followed my gaze around. There was nothing ahead but mountains. The afternoon sun beat down on us, heating our skin, bathing everything in yellow light and reminding me the day was already more than half gone. If we didn't find the sanctuary soon, we'd be spending the night out there. It's probably hidden on the other side of the mountains. Hopefully we'll see it once we get to the top. She tilted her head back to see the pinnacle, and my gaze followed hers. It looked miles away and straight up. We can't climb that. Maybe as wolves, but not like this. I think we should turn back. I gestured to our street clothes, sneakers, and obvious lack of any climbing equipment. Well, I'm not turning back. But I don't know how to wolf out on demand. Can you teach me? I've never taught anyone how to shift before. I'm not sure I can even explain it. Well, how did you learn to shift? My first several shifts were brought on by the moon, like yours. I stayed as a wolf till the moon waned and didn't shift again till the next one. The wolf takes control during the moon, but after a while you become one with your wolf and then you can learn to control it. It takes some time. She dropped her duffel on the ground. We don't have time. I have to figure this out now. What do you do? Just think wolfy thoughts. I chuckled and shook my head. Something like that. Close your eyes. She raised an eyebrow and stared at me for a moment like she wasn't quite sure she could trust me before eventually crossing her arms and dropping her lids. Okay, now what? Now try to feel your wolf inside you. Her eyes popped open and her upper lip curled. What the heck does that mean? What does my wolf feel like? The day you first shifted, did you feel any differently than normal? Yeah. How did you feel? She blushed, immediately rousing my curiosity, but pressed her lips shut. Don't be embarrassed. It's normal for our kind, and it's nothing I haven't felt before. I felt horny as hell. Now it was my turn to blush. I remembered that vividly, too. You were in heat. That's a wolf thing too, but that's not the feeling we're looking for. Do you remember anything else about how you felt? I felt hungry and irritable. I thought it was just that time of the month, but it was more intense than normal. I felt edgy, like I wanted to run or fight. I felt fierce and powerful. I grinned, remembering my own first shift. I felt the exact same way, but I knew what it meant and I welcomed it. That's it. That was your wolf wanting out. She's still inside you, she's just sedated. You need to wake her up. Try to call forth that part of you. Luna closed her eyes again and stood still and quiet for several moments, before growling in frustration. I can't feel it anymore. It's the middle of the day, and we're past the full moon phase. As challenging for a mature wolf. But you're just a pup and your human body has been dominant your whole life. You might not be able to shift till the next full moon. I'm not giving up that easily. I'm the boss, not the stupid wolf. Needs to learn to listen to me. Don't think of it as a separate being. It's not. It's part of you. You don't command it to obey you so much as you embrace that part of you and let it out, instead of repressing it. She looked at me like I was a self-help guru, spouting vague, useless, inspirational platitudes, then huffed and shut her eyes again. Okay, I'm channeling my wolf. Be the wolf. She scrunched up her face and squeezed her hands into fists, tightening her whole body. Can you feel her inside you, her power, her energy? Do you feel that fierceness you felt before? She concentrated so hard she was practically vibrating, and her head looked like it would explode, but nothing happened. After several minutes she released the tension in her body with a growl. I feel like punching someone again, but I think that's just frustration. Why can't I do this? My wolf was more than ready to come out a few days ago. In fact, I couldn't shift back without help from my dad. Why can't I bring it out now when I need it? Don't be upset with yourself, Luna. You're tired, stressed, probably hungry. She nodded and rubbed her belly. It growled in agreement. She let her duffel fall to the ground with a thud, then dug in it and pulled out a squished granola bar that looked like it had been laying in the bottom of the bag for months. This is all I've got, but I'm not sure I even want it. I don't know why I didn't think to bring food. I can shift and catch us something if you don't mind eating it raw. Her face perked up at that. Sounds better than this. She tossed the granola bar aside. I started to strip off my clothes and she dropped her head, but I could tell she was peeking up through her lashes. I couldn't help but smile. You can watch if you want. You seemed to enjoy it before. She huffed and turned her head away. That wasn't me. I was under the influence of powerful werewolf hormones. Once I was naked, I stepped in front of her so she had nowhere to look but at me. So you don't like how I look when you're not a wolf? She slowly raised her head, letting her eyes trail up my body. I wasn't shy. Knew I looked good. Most girls thought I was hot. Luna could have gone for one of the other wolves if she wasn't into me. It would have been a lot smarter on her part. The fact that she didn't told me she definitely found me appealing. I wasn't above using my looks to win her over. She blushed as her gaze lingered on my most impressive parts, then slowly lifted to my eyes. I wouldn't mind watching you shift again. Maybe it will help me learn how to do it. I could work with that. I made a show of flexing as I slowly felt my wolf rise up inside me. When I couldn't contain it any longer, I let it out with a powerful burst of energy, my human flesh and bones exploding and recombining into wolf parts, the sum ending up much greater than the parts. Luna gasped and scuttled backwards. I stood in front of her for a moment, letting her get her fill. Her eyes explored every inch of my wolf without any reservation. I'd never given much thought to how my wolf looked, but I could tell she appreciated it. When my nose caught the musky scent of a deer, I darted off into the woods. After it, I had enough practice hunting that it was easy to catch a small fawn. In one leap, it didn't even see me coming. I carried it back to Luna between my teeth, then dropped my kill at her feet. She gulped and cringed at the sight of it. It was easier to skin in wolf form, so I moved between Luna and the deer so she wouldn't have to watch as I peeled off a strip of fur with my teeth, then tore out a chunk of meat. I turned back to her, gently cradling the meat between my fangs, then stuck out my snout to present it to her. When she held out a hand, I dropped the steaming hunk into her palm. Blood oozed from it, dripping through her fingers and filling the air with its hot metallic scent. She looked at it warily for a moment, then sniffed it and took a tiny taste. Her wrinkled face relaxed. Oh wow, it's so warm, it's like a rare steak. As delicious. She swallowed the bite, then quickly took another. I bit off a hunk for myself, happy and proud that I could satisfy her. We ate in silence for several minutes, our eager groans and chewing the only sound. When we had our fill, Luna pulled a water bottle from her bag and took a few gulps before offering it to me. I opened my mouth and she poured the rest of it in. I didn't think she'd had enough, but she didn't seem to have any more. In my wolf form, I could hear the faint sounds of running water, though. Took the bottle from her, careful not to puncture it, then dashed off to find the stream and refill it. She smiled when I came back with it mostly full, having only spilled a little on the way back. She drank the rest of it, correctly assuming I'd satisfied my own thirst at the stream. When the bottle was empty, she let out a contented sigh. I feel a lot better now. Thank you. I chuffed in response. I was about to shift back to human so I could talk to her again when Luna sat up and stared at me. Then she got to her feet and ran her hand along my flank and over my back. My fur quivered under her touch. Do you think you could climb the mountain with me on your back? I wasn't sure, but I would break my back trying. She was thin, I could bench press her weight as a human, and I was a lot stronger as a wolf. I lowered myself to my belly so she could climb on I don't think I can balance both duffels and hold on to you at the same time. I shook my head and picked up my duffel with my mouth. She slung her duffel strap across her torso and tossed it behind her, then threw her leg over my back and grabbed onto my fur. Then we were off. I savored the warmth and weight of her on me and the way she clung around my neck. It made me feel powerful and needed, and like I was in charge for once. And in my wolf form, it took no effort to climb the mountain with her on my back. I leapt up the craggy rocks and threaded through the dense forest with ease, my strong legs eating up the distance. We should have thought of this a long time ago. What would have taken hours in human form took only minutes as a wolf. Luna whooped and hollered in excitement, and I bellowed out a howl that echoed through the trees, frightening off other creatures. A huge bird squawked loudly at us as it passed overhead, its shadow blocking out the sun for a moment. I was so caught up in the thrill of the run, I didn't realize we had reached the summit till I stumbled over it. Chapter 15. Nico. My claws dug into the rock, scrambling for purchase as I fought to keep myself from falling over the edge, but Luna didn't have a tight enough grip to stop herself from flying forward. She sailed over my head, her body somersaulting. I watched in horror as she tumbled down the backside of the peak, thudding gruesomely as she bounced off large boulders and pinballed between trees. After several long, agonizing seconds, she rolled to a stop. Her body lay limp and lifeless at the bottom of the mountain. I stared at it for a moment, dumbstruck, before leaping down the cliff after her, mindless of my own safety. I pounded onto the ground beside her, shaking it and her, but she didn't move. A loud, tortured howl escaped me. Was she dead because of my carelessness? Her arm lay draped over her hip. I nudged it with my snout, but all it did was flop beside her at an awkward angle. She didn't cry out, even though the bone was obviously broken. One of her legs was twisted, too. What else was broken? I stuck my nose up to hers and held my breath, trying to determine if she was breathing. A gasp ripped from my throat when I felt a tiny stream of warm air. She was still alive. In her human form, she needed immediate medical attention. But we were miles from any kind of civilization. If she could shift, her body would heal itself in the process, but there was no way she could shift now. Even if she knew how, she couldn't do anything while she was unconscious. I was going to have to get her to a hospital, but how? The only way I could carry her as a wolf was with my teeth. I carefully scooped her up in my mouth, but her body flopped around like a rag doll. If I ran, all the jostling might injure her worse. I carefully set her back down. Could I make a stretcher or sling out of something? Maybe I should run back to town and get the hospital to send a helicopter for her. I was so distracted trying to think of a solution, I didn't even notice the giant bird circling overhead till it swooped down and landed beside me with a squawk so loud it echoed off the mountains and reverberated throughout the entire valley. My head jerked up and kept tilting back to scan the full height of him, but my body froze in shock. With a white head, a yellow beak large enough to crack my skull open, claws like meat hooks, and a wingspan of at least 10 feet, he looked like an eagle, but was twice as big. But it was his back end that proved he was no regular bird. His dark wings gave way to tawny brown fur that covered the hind legs and tail of a lion. I'd seen pictures of creatures like him before, but only in mythology books. Werewolves were legends too, though, so why couldn't griffins be just as real as werewolves were? He glared at me with intense yellow eyes, then opened his beak and let out a menacing squawk. He flapped his massive wings as he moved towards me, stirring up enough wind to ruffle my fur. Was he trying to scare me off? Did he think Luna was a tasty morsel he could steal? I leapt between them and barked threateningly at him, but that only made him angrier. How on earth was I going to get rid of this guy so I could help Luna? I barked and growled some more, moving closer to him. I didn't want to attack him because I wasn't positive I would win. It would only take one snap of that beak to bite my head off. He flapped his wings some more, but this time he scuttled backwards. I lunged towards him again, and he spread his wings and took off. I let out a loud howl, feeling victorious. But before I had a chance to turn back to Luna, he flew in a circle, swooped down behind me, and grabbed her with his giant claws, lifting her off the ground. In seconds they were 100 feet in the air and flying quickly. I felt like my heart was being dragged along with them, beat frantically, trying to keep up, and I took off after them, baying in anger. My legs stretched to their limit as I bounded over long stretches of land. I was going so fast my paws barely touched the ground, with my body airborne for several seconds with each leap. It was as close to flying as I could get. I kept my head up, barely watching where I was running as my eyes followed the griffin through the sky. It was a miracle I didn't crash into anything. I skidded to a stop when I broke through the trees and an honest-to-God stone castle came into view. The griffin flew in a circle over it, then disappeared behind a turret. I raced around the backside of the castle, but they were gone. Had he flown inside the castle? Was that where he roosted? I ran back around to the front, leapt up the stone steps and threw myself at the wide double doors, clawing at the wood and barking my head off like a rabid animal. It felt cathartic, but it wasn't very effective, so after a few moments I looked around for a window or another door that I could get in. If on cue, a window opened above me and a gorgeous pale teenage girl with white blonde hair stuck her head out and gawked at me. As defenseless as I felt as a human, I figured I might have better luck getting inside if I could explain myself, so on impulse I shifted. The girl shrieked, but instead of acting scared, she clapped her hands and smiled excitedly, looking me up and down. I quickly covered my privates. Oh my God, are you a werewolf? Mara, come look. A griffin just carried my mate into this castle, I bellowed. I sounded like a madman. The girl frowned and turned her head to talk to someone behind her. I growled when she moved away from the window, and I was about to jump up there when a second girl, this one with dark brown hair, olive skin and a dark mole above full black cherry lips, poked her head around the window frame. She stared suspiciously at me. Please let me in so I can find my mate. He just took her from me, I begged. Anxiety rippled through my body, making me jittery. I probably looked like a crazed drug addict. The blonde girl squeezed in next to the dark-haired girl to gawk at me some more. Standing together, the two girls looked like an angel and a devil, one dressed like a goth princess in black layers and the other in a white sweater and pink jeans. I'm gonna go down and check him out. He's cute, the blonde said. Mara grabbed her arm to stop her and glared at me. I don't trust him. Eris wouldn't take the girl unless he thought she was in danger. She fell and she's badly hurt. She needs medical attention. I'm going to go find Eris. Watch this guy. Don't let him try anything. The dark-haired girl disappeared. The blonde cradled her chin in her hands and leaned her elbows on the windowsill. She looked so innocent and angelic, I didn't know how she could stop me if I did try anything. What's your name, wolf boy? I sighed. I had no desire to chat, but there wasn't much else I could do at the moment unless I wanted to jump through the window. Nico. What's yours? I'm Lorelei. I'm a siren. She smiled sweetly at me and sat down on the window ledge. I tensed and backed up. So that was why the other girl had left her on guard duty. I wouldn't have believed her, but after seeing a griffin it didn't seem any more implausible. Apparently, I'd found the supernatural sanctuary that Luna was looking for. A moment later the large front doors opened with a loud creak. I whipped my head around to see a white-haired man dressed in black walking out with a younger, darker-haired version of himself beside him, both with predatory yellow eyes that narrowed in on me like flashlight beams. I hurried over to them, keeping my hands in front of me. Nudity was no big deal around the pack, but I tried to avoid it around strangers. My name is Ander and this is my son Eris. He claims you were attacking a human. You are a wolf? The old man asked me, his deep voice and wizened appearance commanding respect. Yes, sir. I mean, no, sir. Arg. I yanked a hand through my hair in frustration. Yes, I'm a wolf. No, I wasn't attacking the girl. She's a wolf too and my mate. But she fell and she's injured. I was trying to figure out how to get her back to town without causing more injury when your son swooped in and took her. I glared at him. The younger man shrugged guiltily. He had her in his mouth. It looked like he was going to eat her. I shook my head and rolled my eyes at him. I didn't feel any of the same need to respect him like I did his father. Ander ignored my reaction and said, Wolves can heal themselves, can they not? If the girl is a wolf, why hasn't she healed already? We can only heal when we shift. She's a pup. She doesn't know how to control her wolf yet. Please let me take her to a hospital. She needs medical attention. Eris crossed his arms over his chest. There's no hospital anywhere near here. That's why I brought her here. What were you two doing out here anyway? This is private land. There aren't any wolf packs in these parts. We were actually looking for this place, I think. We needed somewhere safe to hide out. Luna's father heard about this place and sent us here. Your name? Nico Brisbane, and my mate is Luna Ammon. Ander nodded and gestured towards the door. Come, let's go see the girl. Eris grabbed his father's arm to stop him. How do we know he's telling the truth? The girl's unconscious. There are enough supernaturals here to defend our home against one wolf. Should he have an ulterior motive? Ander replied and kept walking. Hurried after him, up the stone steps and into the castle. Eris glared at me and followed us. 2 wolves, if what he says is true. Once inside, he slammed the door shut behind us with an ominous thud. The musty smell of the dank castle didn't completely cover the pungent scent of creatures I couldn't recognize. Who all lived here? The interior walls were the same thick stone as on the outside, making me wonder how they'd run wires to the gold sconces mounted on them. The place looked like it predated electricity by a couple centuries. The dark hardwood floors shined with a glossy patina but were scarred with at least 100 years of wear, including some fierce-looking claw marks. The large entryway opened to an even larger hall with stone staircases curving up either side. The 2 girls from the window hurried down one set of stairs to meet us. Ander pointed at them. This is Lorelei and Mara. One of you get Orson, will you? Where's Cassius? I wondered what kind of soup Mara was, but no one volunteered that information, nor who Orson or Cassius were or why Ander wanted them. But the way Lorelei and Mara argued over who had to go fetch Orson worried me. My imagination ran wild, making me nervous. I was used to being the most dangerous creature around, but here was a whole castle full of potential rivals. What's all the noise? What's going on? I'm trying to sleep up here. A rumbly voice bellowed from upstairs. A huge man with thick dark hair covering every exposed inch of his skin appeared at the top of the other staircase. Mara sidled up to him and ran a hand down his chest, scratching at his chest hair with long black painted nails. Hi Orson. Nice of you to join us, she murmured. His face softened into a goofy smile, and he wrapped his arms around her. Ander led us up the stairs towards him. Orson, we have some guests. This is Nico. He's a werewolf. Eris brought his injured mate here. We're going to check on her. Why don't you come with us? Orson let us pass, then took up the rear, looming a head taller and twice as broad as the rest of us. Do you want me to go find Cassius? Lorelei asked. Ander shook his head. I'm not sure that's a good idea. At the end of the hall, we climbed another set of stairs leading up into the turret, this one narrow and winding. I felt claustrophobic, surrounded by stone and pinned in by supernatural creatures I knew only from storybooks. Windows looked out over the expanse of land surrounding the castle, but they were too small to escape through. I half expected to find Rapunzel dangling her hair from one of them. Another odor I didn't recognize caught my attention, making the hair on my arms stand up. My heart rate quickened, my body tensed, and my wolf roared to life inside me. It took all my willpower to hold him back. When I heard a hiss, a roar, and the bone-crunching, flesh-tearing sound of a wolf shifting, I lost control and my own wolf exploded out of me. I leapt up the stairs towards Luna. Chapter 16. Luna. You know how it feels when you wake up from a nightmare, heart-pounding, body shaking, and it takes a minute to convince yourself it wasn't real? Well, this was like the exact opposite of that. 1 second there was nothing. Darkness, silence, no sensation. I might as well have been dead. Then the next second, pain ripped through me as my body exploded. Suddenly I was wide awake, terrified and panting. I was a wolf. Again. I tried to convince myself it was only a dream, but it wasn't. There was a predator in the room with me. My body knew it even though my mind still felt fuzzy. Standing in the corner, mouth hanging open, was a teenage guy with pale skin, black hair and dark eyes, dressed like a goth hipster in a black cowl neck sweater and dark jeans rolled up over black Timberlands. While slightly creepy looking, he didn't look especially dangerous, but something about him had my hackles raised and my wolf ready to attack. His scent was enough to drive me into a frenzy. I growled and barked at him, and he held his hands up in front of himself and backed into the corner. Suddenly, another wolf bounded into the room, howling. Nico. A wave of relief washed over me. He raced over to me, running his snout up and down my flank, sniffing. Then he whipped around to search out the threat, guarding me with His body. He snarled and growled and barked at the guy in the corner. Saliva dripped from his bared fangs as he snapped his jaws. But before either one of them could attack the other, a giant grizzly bear charged in. He roared and rose up on his hind legs, at least 10 feet tall and flashing enormous claws and fangs. Nico, the guy in the corner, and I all froze. The only sound was our heavy breathing. A moment later, an old man burst into the room. Another teenage guy came in. Behind him, followed by 2 girls. They whipped their heads back and forth. Between me, Nico the bear, and the creepy guy assessing the situation, the old man held out his hands and slowly stepped forward. Cassius, leave the room, please. The creepy guy sidled carefully towards the door, not taking his eyes off us. He squeezed past everyone in the doorway and disappeared down the stairs. Once he was gone, the bear dropped down onto all fours, still staring at us, but less threateningly. Was this the sanctuary? If so, it didn't feel very safe. And why didn't I remember how I got there? The old man turned his attention to Nico and me. Cassius is a vampire. I'm well aware of the enmity between your kind. I will not allow him or anyone else to harm you, but I expect the same from you. Please return to your human form so we can communicate. I stiffened and looked to Nico. Nico glanced warily back and forth between me, the old man, and the stairs while everyone watched us. Eventually, he shifted back into human form. It was just as fascinating to watch. The 2 girls by the stairs seemed a little too curious about Nico's body, though. I glared at them, and a growl rumbled in the back of my throat. As soon as Nico was human again, all eyes turned towards me. I whined and ducked my head behind him. He stroked my chest over my still pounding heart, and I nudged my head against him. She doesn't know how to shift back yet. It might take a while before she's calm enough to let go of her wolf. That's all right. I can see she trusts you. I apologize for my son's hasty reaction. The old man flicked his eyes towards the younger guy who hung his head. We'll give you 2 a little time alone. Everyone else reluctantly turned to leave the room. The old man glanced at the bear and said, Orson, why don't you wait at the base of the stairs for now? And bring our new guests to me when they're ready. The bear slunk off, thumping down the stairs, his claws scratching on the steps. The old man followed after him, leaving Nico and me alone in the small tower-like room. I slumped down onto my belly, exhausted and overwhelmed. Nico sat down on the bed beside me and ran a hand down my flank. I'm so sorry, Luna. Are you okay? Are you in any pain? It was my job to protect you. And I failed. Can you ever forgive me? I cocked my head in question. His face twisted in painful memories. Don't you remember what happened? You flew off me and fell down the mountain. I thought you were dead at first. You were unconscious and you had several broken bones. I was trying to figure out how to get help when a griffin came and snatched you away from me and brought you here. I tensed at the dramatic explanation. I didn't remember any of that, but maybe that was a good thing. The last thing I remembered was the thrill of riding Nico's back as he loped up the mountain, my hands gripping his soft fur, the warm sun on my skin, the wind whipping my hair. I worried you were too hurt to shift and heal yourself, but I guess the threat of a vampire was enough to force your shift. I'm so glad you're okay. He buried his head in my fur, dampening it with his tears. Thankfully, my body had healed when I shifted, and there were no lingering effects of my injury. I never would have known I was hurt so badly if Nico hadn't told me. I had so many questions, though. I wished Nico would shift back to a wolf so I could communicate with him, but I guess I was the one who needed to shift. Nico said I needed to relax before I could shift, so I tried to calm my racing heart and slow my breathing. I was safe for the moment anyway, and we'd found our way to the sanctuary, even if the journey was a little eventful. Nico petted me gently, snuggling up against my side. Surprisingly, I felt calm and safe next to him. Despite my resistance towards him, I'd felt that way the whole journey. Eventually, I felt the stress dissipate. Nico must have sensed it too. Ready to try shifting back? Just do like you did when you were trying to bring out your wolf. Concentrate on the feeling of being human. I chuffed, then focused my mind on human things. It was a lot easier to imagine. But no matter what I did, none of it had any effect on my body. I whined in frustration and started pacing. I wished my dad was around to command me to shift back like before. It made me wonder if Nico had an authority over me since he'd claimed me I suppose if he did, he would have used. Instead, he said, try to remember a powerful human moment and harness the energy you felt. My mind immediately went to the memory of leaving my family. All the sadness and hopelessness came flooding back. But all that did was make me want to forget. I needed to think about a positive memory instead. A moment popped into my brain, bringing with it a rush of pleasure, but I immediately squashed it down. Having sex with Nico was not something I wanted to think about either. But once the memory was in my head, my brain wouldn't let go of it. The experience played out again, and my body responded like it remembered just as well as my brain did. My heart sped up again, pounding out the rhythm of my desire, and my flesh tingled with electrical currents, desperate for someone to touch me and complete the circuit. I mindlessly rubbed up against Nico. He stroked my fur and looked at me curiously. I remembered the feel of his hot hands on my wind-chilled human skin, stroking, kneading, the taste of his lips devouring mine, his firm muscles pressing against me. That moment of ecstasy when I came undone. I cried out as the memory overwhelmed me, and suddenly my body exploded again, my flesh and bones remaking themselves. I crumpled to the ground, a lifeless sack of body parts. Nico hurried over to me and cradled my head in his arms. You did it. Great job. Are you okay? All I could do was breathe heavily for a few moments. I stared up into his warm honey eyes as Nico held me. Something in my gaze must have clued him in to how I was feeling, because he slowly lowered his lips to mine. We kissed gently for several seconds before he pulled away. Sorry, I shouldn't have taken advantage. I wanted to tell him it was okay, admit that I liked it, wanted it even. But wanting to kiss him and wanting to be his mate were two very different things. And it wasn't fair of me to lead him on when I wasn't ready to give him what he wanted. I sat up, pulling my knees up to my chest and wrapping my arms tightly around them. Nico pulled the blanket off the bed and tossed it over my shoulders. He was naked too, but he didn't seem to mind. I couldn't resist peeking at him. A knock sounded on the door, and a young male voice called out, I found your duffel bags out in the woods. I'm going to toss them in. The door opened a crack and our bags pushed through. Nico got up and grabbed them. Thanks. He handed my bag to me, then turned around to give me some privacy. I opened the bag, pulled out the first things I saw, then quickly threw them on. When I turned around, Nico had dressed too. He quirked his lip in a smile, ready to go downstairs and meet the other mutants. After that wild first introduction, I wasn't sure this was a safe place for us after all. But the old man's promise that no one would hurt us repeated in my mind. I looked around at the curved stone walls and glanced out the large window that overlooked the mountains. Where was I? I sucked in a deep breath. I guess so. Nico headed towards the door, so I followed him down winding stone steps. A large, hairy man sat at the bottom of them. He jumped up and looked at us with dark brown eyes I'd seen before, then held out a hand the size of my wolf paw. I'm Orson. I tentatively reached out my own hand, and his engulfed it. Luna, are you? Bear Shifter. He answered the question I didn't know how to ask. Nico shook his hand and introduced himself too. Then Orson nodded down the hallway. Come on, I'll take you to Ander. We followed him to a large room filled with floor-to-ceiling mahogany, bookshelves and several comfortable armchairs. Gold knickknacks dotted every flat surface. The dusty scent of old books made the space feel historic. The old man sat behind a large antique desk. He rose as we entered and smiled kindly, extending a hand so bony and leathery. Felt more like a claw. You must be Luna. Glad to see you're all right. I'm Ander. I am a griffin, and this is my home. Nico had mentioned a griffin earlier, but my brain had skipped over that detail. Now I gawked at him, trying to picture the old man morphing into the mythical creature. My mouth must have been hanging open because Ander chuckled at me. I'm sorry, I'm just new to all this. I didn't even know werewolves existed until a few days ago. Now vampires, bear shifters, and griffins? I thought that was all fairy tale stuff. Don't apologize. I'm glad the human world has relegated my kind to legend. Griffins were hunted almost to extinction a long time ago, and we sought refuge in remote places like this. My son and I settled here a few hundred years ago after I lost his mother. Eventually we opened our home to other supernatural creatures in need of sanctuary. Tell me, why did you come here? I knew he needed to know our story so he could decide whether or not to let us Stay, but I really didn't feel like airing our dirty laundry for a stranger. Besides, if I told him the whole truth, he might not trust Nico, and I realized I wanted him there with me. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I was frantically trying to think up a convincing half-truth when Nico spoke up. Luna is the first she-wolf in generations, so a lot of wolves want her. Our packs are fighting over her. Ander murmured sympathetically, and I let out my breath. Well, I'm happy to provide sanctuary for you as long as you agree to live peacefully with the others. Who all lives here? Nico asked the same question on the tip of my tongue. Ander took a seat in one of the armchairs and gestured for us to do the same. There are 7 of us presently. Besides myself and my son, Orson has been here the longest. I found him as a cub. His mother had been shot by a human. I glanced sympathetically towards the giant man who looked more like a cuddly teddy bear in his human form, even though he was enormous. Several years later, my son saw Lorelei on an outcropping of rocks by the ocean luring the sailors. Sirens are quite appealing even to those who aren't affected by their song. He fancied her and convinced her to come and stay with us. I gulped and my eyes got big. Ander smiled reassuringly at me. Don't worry. Her powers don't seem to have any effect on other supernaturals. Mara's the one you need to worry about, Orson grumbled from the corner. Flicked my eyes to Ander for confirmation. He shook his head. Mara is a witch, but her inability to control her powers forced her into hiding. She knows better than to practice spells on any of the other residents. His vagueness left me curious what had happened. Did she blow up her school or turn somebody into a frog? It sounded like the plotline of a CW show. That left the vampire and one other. What other mythical creature was alive and well and living in this castle? Possibilities ping-ponged through my mind. Like most teenagers, Cassius too struggled to control his urges. He was unable to assimilate in human society and settle down in any one place. During his travels he found us. None of us are a temptation to him like humans are. Nico said vampires were our natural prey, but the way my wolf reacted to him, he felt more like a predator. They must have some kind of defense against us. If Cassius wasn't afraid to snoop around my bed while I was unconscious, my ignorance left me feeling vulnerable. I needed to quiz Nico on vampires as soon as I had a chance. While my thoughts wandered, Ander continued. Lastly, we have Jinx, a fairy changeling whose parents rejected him when they suspected his true nature. He was happy to have a new family. Ander glanced at a tall grandfather clock in the corner when it chimed 6 p.m. It's nearing dinner time. Why don't you join us and you can get to know everyone? Nico and I exchanged a nervous glance, then nodded. I still wasn't sure about this castle full of fairy tale creatures, but it seemed as good a place as any for 2 werewolves on the run. Nico held out a hand and I took it, glad I wasn't doing this alone. Ander smiled. Let's go to the dining room. He led us down the hall to a wide stone staircase with wrought iron railings that curved along the walls of a large hall with ceilings so high they were in shadow. At the bottom of the stairs he turned down another hallway but stopped outside a room with a dark wood table big enough to seat a dozen people and filled with enough food for twice that many. High-back chairs, upholstered in aged, red velvet lined both sides. Ander's son and the 2 girls were already there, as well as Cassius. My body tensed and I hissed and grabbed onto Nico. My wolf quivered, threatening to explode out of me. From the tightness in Nico's muscles, I assumed he was feeling the same way. Ander must have sensed our tension. Cassius is a resident here. If you wish to stay, you'll have to learn to control your impulses around him, and I'll expect him to do the same. It might be difficult at first, but I have confidence that even wolves and vampires can live in harmony if they choose. Won't allow anyone to stay here if I believe they are a threat. Cassius got up and headed towards us, making the hair on my arms stand up. Gritted my teeth and forced myself to stay still even though my body was vibrating with nervous energy. He didn't extend his hand, but he did offer a shaky smile. He looked as human as anyone else, and if my wolf wasn't chomping at the bit to attack him, I never would have guessed he was a vampire. I'm Cassius. I'm sorry I scared you earlier. I was just too curious to resist spying on you. I've never met a werewolf before. Now that I knew what he was, I was curious too, but I didn't have enough control of my wolf yet to have a chat with him. He must have sensed my fragile control because he hurried away and took a seat on the far side of the table. I glanced around at the other residents, who were staring at us curiously. All of them had dangerous, supernatural powers I didn't fully understand. I didn't know if I could trust any of them. The only person I felt safe with was Nico. And a few hours ago he was my biggest enemy. Could I be safe here, or was I making another huge mistake? Chapter 17. Luna. Sit next to me, Luna. The blonde siren patted the chair beside her, a wide smile lighting her angelic face. Her smile seemed almost too friendly. Aggressive even. I couldn't think of a reason to say no that wouldn't risk offending her though, so I slid into the chair. I gave a hesitant smile back to her and to the other girl sitting across from her, who stared me down like her silvery eyes could see into my soul. Her gaze shifted to Nico as he sat down beside me, and her eyes softened a little. I'm Lorelei, and that's Mara. This is Eris. Lorelei wrapped a hand around the arm of the young guy beside her, the one I assumed was Anders' son. Wasn't sure if he owed me an apology or I owed him a thank you, so I just nodded at him. Suddenly, a small boy with spiky blonde hair wearing a purple smock over green and blue striped tights appeared beside me like magic. I jumped and yelped. Thankfully, my wolf didn't feel threatened enough to make an appearance, but my blood pulsed in my ears. Lorelei leaned past me and scowled at him. Jinx, you shouldn't scare people like that. It's not nice. This coming from the girl who lures men to their death? Jinx said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, and rolled his bright green eyes. Now that I had a better look at him, I realized he wasn't a child after all, but more like a miniature man. Lorelei huffed. I can't help it. It's a biological imperative. But I don't do it anymore. I'm reformed. Unlike some people, I try to control my impulses. The tension between them made me nervous, especially since I was in its path. I tried to diffuse it by changing the subject, but I only opened Pandora's box. Jinx? Is that your real name? The tiny man-boy narrowed his eyes at me and disappeared, then reappeared on the other side of the room, hovering midair. Of course not. Do you think I'm an idiot? Ander frowned at him. Manners please, Jinx. I glanced around, confused. Cassius filled me in. He's a fairy. They believe knowing their real name gives a person power over them. It sounded absurd, but no more so than any of the other crazy stuff I'd seen in the last few days. The last thing I needed was another enemy, so I smiled gently at him and said, I'm sorry, Jinx. I didn't mean to upset you. I don't know anything about fairies. I don't even know much about werewolves. Did you wolf out by accident and hurt someone? Is that why you're on the run? Mara the witch asked. Her tone made it sound like she hoped it was true. The others perked up, excited to hear the story. I opened my mouth to give the carefully edited explanation that Nico had offered to Ander, but it got stuck in my throat. It seemed conceited to claim that I was so special that packs were fighting over me. Fortunately, Nico stepped in again and answered for me. Our packs are fighting, and it wasn't safe for us there. Lorelei widened her pale, aqua eyes and put a hand on her forehead like she was going to swoon. You're from enemy packs? Is it like a Romeo and Juliet thing between you two? It reminded me of what my friend Macy has said about Nico and me. I felt a painful pinch in my chest that I might never get to see her again. I hadn't even had a chance to say goodbye. Ander spoke up before I could formulate a response. I doubt our guests wish to discuss their love life with strangers. Let's respect their privacy. Shall we eat? Mara and Lorelei frowned at him like he was ruining all the fun, but they didn't argue with him. Instead, they glanced suspiciously at Jinx and filled their plates. The foods I used to love didn't appeal to me as much now that I was a wolf. But I was eager to change the subject, so I said, dinner looks amazing. Who's the chef? Everyone takes turns making the meals. Tonight was Jinx's turn. Mara gave him a menacing glare I didn't understand until I took a bite of the chicken. It tasted like rotten eggs and turned to gooey chalk in my mouth like it was made of plaster. My eyes watered and my first instinct was to spit it out. But I forced myself to swallow it down and gritted my teeth to keep from gagging. I didn't know it was possible to ruin meat that badly. How on earth was I going to stomach it? I didn't have to worry for long though, because within seconds the rest of the table had the same intense reaction, only they didn't hide it. They gagged and coughed and spit it out onto napkins, their hands, even their plates. All except for Jinx, who started laughing hysterically, a high trilling sound like bells ringing. It's not funny, Jinx. You know you're not supposed to use your magic on us. Mara complained. Orson jumped up and roared at him, the teddy bear turning into a grizzly in spirit if not physically, although the way he was shaking it looked like he might shift any minute. You ruined our dinner on purpose? I'm hungry. What? Are we supposed to eat now? Jinx didn't even flinch at the huge man looming over him. You're always hungry, Orson. You eat like you're getting ready to hibernate. It wouldn't kill you to skip a meal. Enough. Ander pounded the table and everyone quieted. Jinx, I've warned you before about this. Please leave the table. I'll speak to you later. Jinx rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. It was hilarious. And harmless. The way Ander glared at him, his yellow eyes flashing, I thought he might shift and carry him off in his talons. Jinx grumbled under his breath then disappeared. Ander sighed and shook his head as he looked at Nico and me. I'm sorry you had to experience that. I do not allow any of the residents here to use their powers against one another. I will not stand for that, not even in jest. There will be consequences for his behavior. I didn't want to ask what he meant by that, but the way everyone else got quiet made it clear he was serious. It was reassuring and intimidating at the same time. I didn't know how to control my abilities yet. What if I did something wrong? He turned to Mara and said, We are in need of a speedy dinner. I'm sure our guests are hungry. Do you think you can whip something up? I thought she might go into the kitchen, but instead she stood up and pulled a wand out of a sheath hanging from a leather belt around her waist. Sucking in a deep breath, she waved the wand over the table and said, Cybus, evanescent. Suddenly all the food disappeared. I gasped and laid a hand on my empty plate, but it didn't feel empty. It felt lumpy and squishy. I jerked my hand away and wiped the invisible gunk on my napkin. Ander saw what I did, poked at his own plate, then pinched something and picked it up, prodding it with a finger. Close but not quite, Mara. Why don't you try again? The others started laughing at her and jabbing at the invisible food on their own plates. Mara frowned, then carefully touched her plate. Her cheeks turned red, and she quickly waved her wand again. Cybus, a buyer. I waited for someone else to touch their plate that time before checking to see if my plate was as empty as it looked. Once Ander was sure the spell had worked properly, he said, Why don't you try conjuring up a nice salmon for me, Mara? She tried a few spells before she landed on the right one, first creating a realistic-looking fish that was nothing but an image, then conjuring up a live one that immediately flopped off the plate and onto the floor. Lorelei happily snatched it up and ate it. Eventually, Ander had a tasty baked salmon on his plate. Orson and Eris wanted the same thing, so she conjured some for them too. Then she turned to Nico and cooed, What can I get for you? I'd love a rare steak if you can do it. But if not, a salmon would be fine. Same here, I piped up. She waved her wand, mumbled something, then squeaked out a cheer as excited as we were when she got it right on the first try, and a juicy pink steak appeared on Nico's plate. She conjured up one more for me, then turned to Cassius. Cassius wiggled his eyebrows. Can I get a still-beating human heart? That's too much trouble, I'll just take the whole human. Ander scowled at him, then looked at Mara. He'll have a rare steak as well. You spoil all the fun, Cassius grumbled. She conjured up a steak for Cassius, then we all took tentative tastes of our food. I happily chewed and swallowed when I discovered it actually tasted good. Thank you, Mara. This is great. Yeah, this is amazing, Nico said. Her lips curled in a wide smile, and she leaned forward and peeked up at him through her lashes. You really like it? He nodded and mumbled around a huge mouthful of steak. Absolutely. I can't believe you can wave a wand and conjure up food like this. It's incredible. I'll make you whatever you want whenever you want it, Nico. Just ask, she murmured, pushing out her chest. She didn't extend the same offer to anyone else. I focused on chewing so I wouldn't growl at her. I didn't know why I felt jealous that she was flirting with him. A few days ago I wanted to get as far away from Nico as possible, and although I didn't despise him as much as I did then, I still wasn't in love with him or anything. Regardless, I wasn't going to risk upsetting her or giving Nico any ideas by staking my claim over him. The others bantered back and forth as they ate, joking about the unusual dinner, but I stayed quiet, just grateful I wasn't the topic of conversation. I finished my steak quickly and wished I had more, but I didn't feel comfortable asking Mara to conjure up a second one for me. Nico noticed my empty plate and the look of longing on my face, though. Luna, are you still hungry? Do you want some more? I'm sure Mara would be happy to make you another one. The look on Mara's face told me she wasn't happy about the way Nico was fawning over me. What was her deal? If it's no trouble, I said, plastering on a saccharine smile. Ander must have caught the tension between us because he gave Mara a stern look. We're a family here. We help each other in whatever way we can. That extends to both of you if you'd like to stay here. Nico and I exchanged a silent look. This place might be full of strange creatures, but it was our best option at the moment. I turned to Ander and said, "Thank you. We would." Ander gave a welcoming smile. "We'll find a room for you right after dinner." He turned to Mara and said, "Give our new friends a second helping. They've had a long day." Mara forced back a snarl and conjured up more steak for us. I took a small first bite, just in case she decided to vent her irritation through the food, but it tasted fine. Maybe I was imagining her attitude. After dinner, Ander led us upstairs and down a hallway lined with bedrooms. He stopped at one halfway down, then opened the door and ushered us in. My eyes scanned the large space, taking in the fringed oriental rug, the antique cherry furniture, and the tapestry decorating one of the stone walls. But it was the bed beneath it that captured my attention. One bed in the center of the room. This is the only empty room with a bed big enough for two. Will this suit? I opened my mouth to protest, but Nico shot me a warning look and spoke up. Before I got out any words, "This is great, Ander. Thanks so much." Nico must have told him that we were mated. I shut my mouth, not wanting to contradict whatever story he told Ander and risk his trust, but I gave Nico a look that promised he'd be hearing about this later. "There are bathrooms down the hall to your left. I'll have Eris bring your things from the tower. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll let you get some rest now. I'm sure you're exhausted. Breakfast will be available whenever you wake up." As soon as Ander left, I shut the door and whipped around towards Nico, dropping my smile. "Why did you tell him we were mated?" "Eris thought I was attacking you. That's why he snatched you from me. I had to convince them to trust me." I threw my hands in the air. "But now they expect us to act like mates." He stepped closer and gave me a cocky smile. "Is that so bad?" I pushed past him and flopped on the bed with my arms and legs spread wide, taking up the whole space. "You might think so after a few nights of sleeping on the floor." He huffed, then sighed. "Fine. But you can't tell them." I sat up and glared at him. "Tell them what? The truth? That you claimed me against my will before I even knew what you were doing? Yeah, they might not trust you so much if I told them that. I know the feeling." He sat down beside me on a tiny open corner of the bed. "I already told you how sorry I am about what I did. Will you ever forgive me? I can't change it, Luna. All I can do is try to make it up to you by protecting you." I wanted to insist that I didn't need or want his protection, but the truth was I was scared and lonely and overwhelmed by all of this. Having someone there with me, even someone like Nico, was better than dealing with this on my own. I didn't like showing weakness, though, so I wasn't about to admit any of that. I twisted my scowl into a quirky grin, then grabbed a pillow and smacked him with it. "You're still sleeping on the floor, though. Lay by the door so that vampire can't get in." Eris delivered our duffel bags a few minutes later. Then Nico and I went searching for the bathrooms to get ready for bed. Small wooden plaques hung from the doors, differentiating the ladies' room from the men's. I flinched when I walked inside and saw Mara standing at the wide, gold-veined marble vanity using one of the two sinks. I flicked her a small smile, then hurried past and used one of the stalls, hoping she'd leave before I was done. But she was still standing there when I came out, slathering her face with moisturizer from a tiny jar that looked like it cost a fortune, but she'd probably conjured up with a wave of her wand. Even without her makeup on, she was still beautiful. I washed my hands and stared at our reflections in the mirror. I looked frumpy in comparison, with my fair skin deathly pale from all the stress, dark circles under my eyes, and my hair a tangled mess. Mara gave me a once-over, and her grimace told me she thought the same thing. "I've never met a werewolf before. Does it hurt when you shift? It looks like it's exhausting." I didn't have any fancy potions to improve my skin, so I pulled out a hairbrush and tried to tame my snarled mane instead. It hurts, but it feels good at the same time. Like I'm breaking out of a confined space. Feels powerful and freeing to let the animal out of its cage. She didn't flinch in fear or cower in intimidation like I hoped she would. Instead, she smirked and said, "I'd like to watch. Will you shift for me?" "It's no trouble." Before I could respond, she widened her eyes exaggeratedly and put a hand to her mouth. "Oh wait, I forgot. You don't know how yet." Nico said, "You're just a puppy." I narrowed my eyes at her in the mirror and bit back a growl. She gave a cocky smile back. "Maybe Nico will shift for me. Do you know which room he's in?" I stuck the hairbrush back in my bag and yanked the door open, ignoring the fact that I hadn't brushed my teeth or changed into my pajamas. "Yeah, 2 doors down on the right. Same one as me, since he's my mate." Chapter 18. Nico. Luna yanked the door open, stomped inside, then slammed it shut behind her. Was there steam curling from her ears? Or was that just my imagination? She still had her jeans on, even though she'd gone to the bathroom to change into her pajamas. Did something happen? I dared to ask her but stayed on the other side of the room because she looked like she wanted to rip someone's head off, presumably mine, since I'd been public enemy number 1 ever since that fateful night in the woods. That Mara is an obnoxious skank. She's attracted to you and she's being blatantly obvious about it, even though she knows you're my mate. She thinks she can take whatever she wants. As angry as Luna was, I couldn't help the smile that crept up my cheeks. Maybe she hadn't admitted to herself that she wanted me yet, but she clearly didn't want anyone else to have me. Her possessive attitude gave me hope that maybe she was warming up to me more than she let on. I'll make sure she knows I'm already taken. She crossed her arms over her chest and stamped her foot repeatedly. I just don't like her attitude. She acts like she'd like to take me out to get to you. I won't let her touch you. I slowly moved closer and put a hand on her arm to calm her down, but she ignored it. She's very pretty and talented. I can see why you might like her. If you can, ignore the bitchiness. She scrunched her face up in a snarl. Luna, you don't need to worry. I'm not interested in her. I made it to you. You're the one I want. Right. Because of the whole mate bond thing. I guess that's why I'm feeling so defensive. My hand fell from her as she forced her arms to drop to her sides and blew a puff of air towards her forehead, ruffling her hair. I put a hand on her cheek and turned her head so I could make eye contact. Wanted her to see the truth in my eyes. That's not why I'm interested in you. It's because you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and I love your fiery spirit and how brave and strong you are. You amaze me. Her eyes sparked with blue flames like I'd tossed on a log of driftwood, creating a new type of fire inside her. Suddenly, she pressed her lips against mine in a kiss that seared my skin. Fire exploded inside me and licked every inch of my body. I grabbed her around the waist and held on tight to her, letting the fire inside of me ravage her as hers consumed me. We tumbled to the bed, tangled up together when our legs threatened to disintegrate beneath us. She pawed at me, her nails raking at my shirt, tearing it open. A groan escaped both of us when her blazing hand pressed against my skin. I slipped my own hand under her shirt, and she writhed like my fingers were tongues of fire. When I slid my hand inside the front of her jeans and pressed it against her, she cried out and pressed back. Oh God, yes. Her words were a starter pistol, sending my desire racing, but she threw up a roadblock as soon as I took off. My body roared in protest, but when I saw the look on her face, I felt instantly guilty. Her eyes popped open and her face twisted up as she dug her nails into my flesh. Tears squirted from the corners of her eyes. She shook her head and pushed me off her, sitting up. I'm sorry, Nico. I shouldn't have started it. I'm so confused right now. I don't even understand what I'm feeling. Do I really want you, or is it just jealousy, fear, and the mate bond making me feel this way? She wiped the tears from her agonized face. I cautiously wrapped an arm around her. It's okay, Luna. I understand. I'm here for you, whatever you need or want. But I don't want you to do anything you're not ready for. She laid her head on my shoulder. Her chest heaved as she sobbed against me. Eventually she whimpered. I'm not as brave and strong as you think I am. I stroked her back as I cradled her. Yes, you are. Being brave doesn't mean you're never afraid, and being strong doesn't mean you never need help with anything. She let me hold her for several minutes before she lifted her head and sniffed. back her tears wiping her cheeks. I think I need some sleep. I'm wiped out. Me too. I'll make up a bed on the floor. I moved to get up, but she reached for me. You can stay if you want. Her shaky voice and pleading eyes told me she wanted it too. Sleeping next to her but not touching her would be torture, but I wouldn't pass up the chance for the world. I took off my shirt and dropped my jeans to the floor, leaving on my boxer briefs, then pulled back the covers. Luna stared at me for a minute, biting her lip, then shimmied out of her own jeans. Do you want your pajamas? I held out her duffel bag. She nodded and took it. I turned around, giving her a moment of privacy. When I turned back, her shirt and a pretty blue bra lay on the floor, and she wore a tiny t-shirt that hugged her curves and a pair of flannel sleep pants. She climbed under the covers and I slid in beside her. After a moment of hesitation, I scooted closer, putting a hand on her hip. She nestled her backside up against me and I forced my body to behave. I fell asleep with my face buried in her hair, her scent and warmth soothing me like a lullaby. When I woke up in the morning, she'd rolled over and nuzzled against me, and my arm was holding her close. I wanted to stay that way forever, but she jerked awake a few minutes later and pushed herself away from me. I pretended I was just waking up, stretching and yawning. I need to use the bathroom. She grabbed her bag and moved towards the door, her face an emotionless mask. Did she regret being vulnerable with me last night? It was such a departure from her normal confidence. I should have expected it wouldn't last. Chipping away Luna's hard shell was going to be tougher than that. I stayed in bed till she left since I had a massive hard-on. I waited a few minutes for her to get down the hall before grabbing my own bag and heading down to the men's room. I didn't think about the fact that I was wearing only underwear till Mara came out of the bathroom. She made no effort to hide her curiosity as her eyes roved up and down my body. When they got back to my face, she quirked an eyebrow and said, I thought Luna would take care of that for you. I flapped my jaw like a fish, no clue how to respond to that. I was too stunned to even cover myself. She smirked and turned into a doorway. If you need some help, I'll be in my room. I hurried past, rubbing one hand over my face and holding my bag in front of my crotch with the other. I slipped into the bathroom and groaned out loud when I realized it was empty. After a cold shower, I went back to the room where Luna's scent bloomed from her warm, damp body as she brushed out her wet hair, reminding me of that day. She'd first come into heat and her scent had grabbed a hold of me like a scythe and dragged me to her. She wasn't in heat anymore, but her scent still called to me. I wanted to sidle up behind her and bury my face in her neck, breathe her in, but the look on her face told me she wouldn't respond to that the way I wanted her to. I gave her a soft smile instead and said, "Ready for breakfast?" She turned towards me and nodded. We walked in silence down to the dining room. I had no idea what was going through her head, but I was too afraid to say anything that might upset her. A spread of food covered the table again, but only a few people were there at the moment. Unfortunately, one of them was Mara and another one was Cassius. They were cozied up next to each other. Mara scowled at Luna, but Cassius curled his lips in a smile. I could sense Luna tensing beside me. I looped a hand through her arm in a silent promise to protect her. She didn't pull away from me, so I took it as sign that she didn't completely hate me, even though she was acting as cold and hard as stone. Ander looked up when we came in and said, "Good morning. Help yourself to whatever you'd like. I promise it's all edible." I grinned and escorted Luna to a seat as far away from Mara and Cassius as possible. We both filled our plates with breakfast meats, ignoring the bagels, muffins and pastries. I would have preferred another steak, but I certainly wasn't going to complain. It was still hard to believe Ander had opened his doors and offered food and lodging to two strangers. He had to want something in return, but I had no idea what it was yet. I didn't like feeling indebted to him, and I wanted to count the cost before I took too much of his charity, so I said, "I'm not a great chef, but I can cook a few things if you'd like us to take a turn making a meal. I want to do my part to help out." "Thank you, Nico. Yes, everyone shares the responsibilities of cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the property. We make up a schedule once a week, so we'll put you and Luna on the next one. In the meantime, feel free to relax and enjoy yourselves. I want this to be a refuge from the troubles of the outside world. There are televisions, a game room, computers, a pool, a workout room, and plenty of land for you to explore. Make yourself at home here." I shook my head, blown away. This was like a fantasy world. I was free of the pressures of the pack and my dad's unattainable expectations, free from the prying eyes of the human world, and I had Luna here and all the time I wanted. With her. That sounds amazing. Thank you, and I can't tell you how grateful we are. Luna murmured her own heartfelt appreciation, and her face reflected almost the same sense of ease as mine. I dared to squeeze her hand under the table. What would you like to do today, Luna? Chapter 19. Nico. I want to work on shifting. I need to be able to control my wolf. Of course she did. A normal girl might want to watch a movie or go for a swim. Relax a little now that she was out of immediate danger, but it shouldn't have surprised me that Luna was more interested in training. I wasn't sure she would ever be able to relax and let her guard down. I made it my secondary goal after winning her heart, to help her find peace. Maybe once she could control her wolf, she'd feel more in control of her life again. Okay, sure. I can help you work on that. Cassius twisted his thin red lips in a sly smile that looked like a bloody slash against his pale skin. I can help too. Provide a little extra motivation. She didn't seem to have any trouble shifting when I was around. My eyes bulged in shock and rage, and my claws popped out, digging into the table. I didn't want that monster anywhere near her. I forced back the string of swear words that threatened to spew out at him and turned to Ander, expecting him to stand up for us. But instead, his face wrinkled up in a smile and he nodded. That's very generous of you, Cassius. That's the kind of cooperation I like to see. Enemies learning to get along and help each other. Mara didn't look too happy about it, but Cassius raised an eyebrow at me with a victorious smirk. Shall we head to the lawn? I glanced out the window at the brilliant pink and gold sunrise beaming over the top of the mountains. It's daylight. Don't vampires have to stay out of the sun? Most do, yes. But I'm lucky enough to have a witch friend who managed to put a ward around me. Makes life so much more convenient. He winked at Mara. Ignoring the scowl, she turned towards him and gave another one of his signature evil grins. Sounds good. Let's do it, Luna said before I had a chance to voice another protest. She got up, leaving her plate for whoever had dish duty, then marched determinedly towards the front doors. I scurried after her, Cassius on my heels, breathing his hot stench down my neck. My skin puckered up with goosebumps. Luna flung the doors open like she was on a mission and nothing would stop her from completing it. Light poured in and I whipped around, hoping that the spell had failed and Cassius was burning up, but all it did was make his pale skin look even whiter and his slicked back black hair shine like a raven's back. We trotted after Luna as she tromped out to the middle of the open lawn. As soon as she got there, Cassius hurled himself at her with a snarl. His trim body flew through the air towards her like a streak of black lightning. My wolf reacted immediately, tearing out of me with a burst of energy that sent me leaping towards him. But Luna reacted just as quickly, her own body twisting and morphing as her bones cracked and black fur popped out of her skin. I jumped in between them, worried she wouldn't have the self-control to resist attacking him. Cassius stopped just short of us. He shook his head, smiling and staring at us. If he was afraid of us, he didn't show it. That was truly incredible. Such magnificent animals. I wonder how you would fare in a fight with me. I snapped my teeth and snarled at him, growling viciously. He held up his hands. Just a thought. I turned to Luna, grateful I could communicate with her telepathically so Cassius wouldn't hear. I don't trust this guy, Luna. Let's tell him to get lost. No, he's good motivation. You said yourself the more I practice the easier it will be for me to control my shift. I want to do it again. I just have to figure out how to shift back. My body heated, remembering how she managed to shift back last time and the desires it inspired in her. It's going to be hard to shift back when there's a threat around. Why don't we go somewhere private? No, I have to learn to control my wolf, no matter what situation I'm in. I had no idea how to help her calm down with a vampire looming beside her. Doubted I could even calm myself enough to shift back. It took all myself control to keep my wolf from attacking. Cassius quirked an eyebrow at us as we stared at each other. What's happening here? Are you two communicating in some way? I growled and barked at him, communicating in a way he could understand even if it wasn't English. He had the nerve to chuckle at me. My wolf fantasized about ripping his head off. That would shut him up. As he spoke, his voice like melted dark chocolate, he gradually eased closer. Let me guess. You're trying to help her shift back, but it's challenging. Because I'm here. But I'm not really a threat now, am I? I wouldn't actually hurt you. Besides, I'm just one young vampire who's never fought a wolf before. And there are two of you. I'm sure you could easily take me down. He carefully stretched out his palm towards Luna. Her body quivered and her breath came in heavy pants. She sniffed his palm and whined but didn't snap at him, so he slowly turned his hand over and slid it up her snout, then stroked the top of her head. A growl rumbled in the back of my throat and my heart pounded, my body ready to lunge at him if he tried anything. Good girl. See, you're not in danger. Just relax. He kept stroking her fur, then switched to scratching. She dipped and turned her head so he could reach behind her ear. Eventually, she laid down on the grass and put her head at his feet. I let out a mournful howl of protest. What was going on here? Was she going to roll over and present her belly to him? But before it went that far, Cassius took his hands off her and stepped back. Do you think you can shift back now? Luna chuffed. A few seconds later, she cried out as her body contorted back into its human form. She dropped to the ground with a thud, naked and breathing hard but with a triumphant smile on her face. Then she jumped up and pumped her fists in a victory dance, heedless of her nudity. I did it. Think I'm getting the hang of this. Cassius took in an eyeful of her naked body, so I quickly moved in front of her, blocking his view and snarling at him. I want to try it again. This time don't jump me, Cassius. That wouldn't have been hard for me, since I still considered him a threat. But he tamed Luna's wolf so thoroughly, I doubted she would shift even if he did attack her. I offered some words of encouragement to help her out. Vampires are the enemy, Luna. You need to take down the threat. Let your wolf do what it was created to do. Luna smirked at my ominous tone but then turned her attention to Cassius, staring him down with laser beam eyes. Come on, Luna. You can do it. Show me what you've got. I want to see that. Wolf again, he murmured seductively. I chuffed at him. Did he really think that would work? But to my shock it did. Suddenly Luna's wolf burst out again. She shook out her fur and gave a dopey grin. Cassius clapped and trotted over to her to scratch her under the chin. Her tongue hung out as he petted her. She shifted back a minute later. It's getting easier. Thanks, Cassius. You're a big help. She gave him that broad smile she'd only given me once and I'd been desperate to earn again. I wanted to jump on him, tear him limb from limb and rip his heart from his body. Since I couldn't do that, I wanted to bound off into the woods and burn off my frustration by racing through the trees in pursuit of something. But the last thing I wanted to do was leave Luna alone with him. No problem. Happy to help any time. How about a little fight just to see what you've got? I couldn't help myself. A roar tore from my throat, and I lunged at Cassius, my sharp fangs aiming for his skinny neck. Luna's wolf exploded out of her, jumping between me and the vampire. I barely managed to stop myself from attacking her. She was protecting the vampire from me? She growled and barked, snapping at me. Nico, no. You can't attack him. Calm down. I shook my body, trying to release some of the animalistic energy that was raring to be unleashed. Are you insane? I could have killed you. You were about to kill him. He didn't do anything. I looked around her and bared my teeth at him, growling. I didn't like how she had her back to him. He watched us with a smirk. He wants to fight you. He'll tear you apart. No, he won't, Nico. He's just trying to help. You're overreacting. We don't know anything about him, Luna. All we know is he's a vampire. I know. You're just a young pup and you don't know much about our kind, but vampires are our enemies. I don't care how much he sweet-talks you or rubs your belly. He's dangerous. One bite could kill you. We shouldn't even be around him. Come on, let's go. I nipped at her neck, pulling her away from him. She jerked away from me, snarling and snapping at me. I'm not some stupid pup, Nico. And you're not the boss of me. If I want to practice with him, that's my decision. The alpha in me howled in protest. I wanted to demand her submission, but technically, I didn't have any authority over her since she wasn't in my pack. I forbid it. You're my mate, and you will obey me. The words burst out. Before I could stop myself, I cringed at how much I sounded like my dad. Luna's eyes narrowed and crystallized, hard as diamonds. Is that what you expect? Well, keep dreaming. You're not my alpha and I reject your claim on me. She howled at me and shifted back to her human form in a burst of rage, her fur flying. Then she turned to Cassius, arms crossed over her heaving chest. Shook with anger, expecting her to tell him she wanted to spar with him, but instead she said, I'm kind of tired and hungry. Think I need a break. But I'd love to work together some more later if you want to. Sure, anytime. Cassius glanced curiously between us but didn't ask what was going on. I'm sure he could figure it out. Luna stomped away, tempting me to tear Cassius apart while I had the opportunity. Somehow I managed to resist my baser instincts and loped away from him instead. I was too worked up to shift back, but I followed Luna towards the house. When I got near enough to reach her, I nudged her flank. She stopped and whirled around to glare at me. Don't touch me, Nico. I don't want anything to do with you.